The crash wasn't what anyone would call graceful. Metal groaned, vines snapped, and my shuttle buried itself nose first into the dirt like it was trying to dig its own grave. I staggered out, covered in smoke and leaves, cursing my luck and praying the jungle wasn't full of things eager to turn me into dinner. Then the ground shook, once, twice, like the footsteps of a walking earthquake. She stepped out of the foliage, towering over me, fur glinting in the sunlight, eyes sharp and hungry. A giant alien woman. At least 12 feet tall, vulpine features, all muscle and attitude. Her first words weren't exactly comforting. "Mine," she growled, pointing a clawed finger at me like I was the last slice of cake at a family dinner. Before I could argue, the ground trembled again, and out came a second one, just as tall, just as intimidating, and somehow even more smug. "No, his mine." And that's how I learned two giant alien women could argue about ownership while I stood in the middle like a confused prize pig. They circled, tails lashing, voices rising, tossing around phrases that made me sweat for reasons I didn't want to admit. "I'll keep him busy all night. He'll last longer with me. He's small, but I know how to use him." Each line sounded less like a threat and more like a dirty joke told by someone's drunk aunt. I tried to speak up. "Ladies, please, I'm not," but my voice got drowned out by the sound of a tree snapping in half. One swung her arm to make a point, and there went an ancient trunk, collapsing like wet paper. Birds fled, monkeys screamed, and I realized the jungle was the first casualty of their romantic spat. They loomed closer, one on each side, bending down to inspect me like bargain hunters. One poked me in the chest with a claw, muttering, "Fragile." The other sniffed me, then smirked. "But feisty." I tried sarcasm, because that's all humans have when faced with overwhelming size. "Great, glad I'm being reviewed like a piece of fruit at a market. Just don't check my ripeness." That earned me a rumble that might have been laughter. Or hunger. Hard to tell. Their argument only escalated. The first lifted me effortlessly into the air, clutching me against her chest like a doll. "See? He fits perfectly." The other yanked me back with just as little effort. "No, he's better with me. Watch how he squirms." And I did squirm, because being pulled back and forth between two women built like fortresses tends to shake the nerves out of anyone. The double entendres didn't stop. "He'll break under your grip. Only if you don't know where to hold him. You've got no stamina, I'll make him last." Each line managed to sound like both a threat to my life and a preview of a very different kind of night. Meanwhile, the jungle suffered. Vines ripped, trees toppled, rocks cracked under their stumping. Animals fled in droves, some diving straight into rivers just to escape the destruction. I was the eye of a storm made entirely of jealousy, muscles, and very sharp claws. Finally, I shouted, "Stop! I am not a chew toy." That froze them both for a second. Their ears twitched, tails flicked, and then they both leaned down at the same time, teeth bared and something dangerously close to grins. The first one said, "If you're not a toy, then what are you?" The second added, "Something better? Something edible." The way they licked their fangs did not ease my concerns. I muttered, "I swear, this is how fairy tales start, and not the children's kind." They kept circling, testing each other with little shoves that shook the earth, claws flashing, but never drawing blood. All while throwing me looks like I was the prize for whoever won. And let me tell you, when you're 5'9" and the contestants are double your height, there's no real comfort in being called the grand prize. One finally declared, "I claim him," with the sort of triumph reserved for conquerors. She pressed her nose against my neck, inhaling deeply. The other snarled and snatched me away, nipping my hand hard enough to sting. "No, he's mine. See? Marked." I checked my hand, saw the teeth mark, and groaned. "Oh, fantastic. Not only am I luggage, now I'm branded." Their fight paused again, this time because both of them realized they couldn't exactly tear me in half without ruining the prize. So instead, they both declared in unison, "We'll share him." That was not the outcome I was hoping for. I tried reasoning. Ladies, you're both beautiful, terrifying, and way out of my weight class, but I think I should just. My sentence got cut off when one flicked her tail around me like a rope and hoisted me onto her shoulder. The other followed, glaring daggers, but smirking like she already had plans. The jungle behind us groaned with broken branches and crushed foliage. Birds were gone, the ground looked like a battlefield, and somewhere in the distance, I heard a predator roar in confusion before fleeing. All because two giant alien women had decided I was theirs. And me? I clung to the fur of my captor's shoulder, heart racing, sweat dripping, muttering under my breath. This was supposed to be a research mission. Now I'm a chew toy in a love triangle. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Being claimed by two giant alien women turned out to be less romantic and more like living between two competing demolition crews. They decided the best way to win me over was through gifts, and apparently subtlety wasn't part of their culture. One came stumping through the jungle dragging an entire uprooted tree behind her like it was a bouquet. She dropped it at my feet with a proud grin and announced, "A flower, for my mate." Before I could respond, the other slammed down a boulder twice her size with a smirk. "A pillow, for his delicate sleep." The ground trembled, the tree splintered, and I stood between a log and a hard place wondering if anyone had ever died from too much affection. I tried explaining human gifts. You know, flowers are supposed to be small, like one you can hold in your hand. One tilted her head, tail flicking. "Then I will bring him a smaller mountain next time." The other corrected her. "No, humans like rings. Circles of metal." She vanished into the foliage and returned dragging what looked like half a crashed satellite, twisted into a crude circle. "See? A ring. He will wear it." They both stared at me, expecting joy. I stared at the wreckage and muttered, "Congratulations, I'm engaged to space junk." Their misunderstanding didn't stop there. I made the mistake of mentioning that romance makes the heart race. They took it literally. One lifted me by the waist and shook me like a maraca. "His heart is moving faster." The other pressed her ear against my chest and growled, "Not enough. He needs more stimulation." She thumped me on the back hard enough to nearly eject my lungs. My heart was definitely racing now, though not for the right reasons. When I told them love was about having a backbone, things went downhill again. They began to argue over whether my spine was sufficient for mating. One poked it like she was testing a fruit's ripeness. The other snarled, "Too soft. He needs a stronger one." For a horrifying moment I thought they might try to replace it. I quickly clarified that it was just an expression. Their ears twitched. Humans are strange. They talk in riddles about bones. The more I tried to guide them toward subtlety, the worse it got. I said affection was about a gentle touch. One immediately picked me up with both hands and started poking me with her claws as delicately as she could manage, which was still like being jabbed by skewers. The other leaned in to try kissing me, and by kissing, I mean she opened her jaws wide enough to swallow my head and nearly inhaled me. Her lips covered half my face, and when she pulled back, I was dripping with saliva. She smiled proudly. "See? Gentle." I wiped my face and muttered, "If that was gentle, I don't want to see rough." They didn't stop competing. One brought me food, an entire live boar dangling by its tail. She dropped it in front of me, expecting me to rip in with my tiny teeth. The other ran off and returned with a struggling, squawking bird the size of a car. She thumped it down and declared, "A feast for our mate." The bird immediately tried to kill me, flapping its massive wings. Both women growled, snapped its neck in unison, and presented the corpse proudly. "Eat." I stared at the mountain of raw meat and said, "Do you have anything vegetarian?" It became clear they weren't just competing for my affection, they were competing to prove who understood humans better. When I said we share meals on dates, they interpreted it as each woman must bring an entire jungle's worth of food. When I explained the idea of a candlelit dinner, one ripped a glowing vine from a tree and set the forest on fire. She smiled, satisfied. "Light." The other stumped out the flames angrily and dragged me away from the smoke, hissing, "she'll kill him with too much passion." My patience was tested, but sarcasm is a universal language. I finally told them, "Look, if you two keep this up, the only thing I'll be in love with is the grave you dig me." They both blinked, confused, then burst into rumbling laughter that shook the leaves off nearby trees. Humans speak death as romance. He is perfect. Yet, despite the chaos, something softened. Their attempts at affection, while destructive, weren't entirely empty. When one thought I was cold, she curled her tail around me like a blanket. When the other thought I looked tired, she lowered her massive hand so I could sit in her palm and rest. Their gestures were clumsy, often painful, but strangely sweet. The problem was their rivalry. Every time one did something tender, the other had to outdo it. If one brushed dirt off my shoulder, the other tried to wash me in a river by dunking me underwater until I flailed like a drowning cat. If one offered a smile, the other bared her fangs in what she swore was also a smile, though it looked more like she was about to bite my head off. I found myself lecturing them like a teacher scolding students. Romance isn't about who brings the bigger rock or who makes me sweat more. It's about care, listening, and not flattening the scenery. They both tilted their heads, ears flicking, clearly not understanding but pretending they did. One finally said, "Then show us. Show us how humans care." That was my mistake. I tried to demonstrate by holding their claws gently. To me, it was simple affection. To them, it was apparently a signal for something far more intimate. Their eyes widened, tails puffed, and they both pressed in closer. I felt like a deer caught between two freight trains. Easy now, that's just a gesture. But it was too late. One licked my cheek. The other nipped my shoulder. Both purred like thunder rolling across the horizon. And somewhere in the distance, another chunk of jungle gave way under their stomping as they each declared again, "Mine." The problem with being claimed by two giant alien women wasn't just the attention, it was the competition. They treated every glance, every accidental brush of my hand, like proof that I belonged to one more than the other. The jungle became their battlefield, and I was the prize they were willing to wreck the planet for. It started small, if you can call small two giants wrestling over who got to carry me. One lifted me to her shoulder, the other yanked me down by the waist, and within seconds I was tossed around like a ragdoll between them. Trees splintered, vines snapped, and I was the unwilling rope in a tug-of-war. When I shouted that I wasn't a toy, they both smirked and replied, "Then we'll play rougher." Their flirting turned into war. One stood tall and slapped her tail across the ground in a show of dominance, flattening everything in a wide arc. The other retaliated by yanking out a tree and tossing it aside like a twig. The jungle echoed with crashes, birds fled in screaming flocks, and monkeys hurled fruit before fleeing in terror. I kept thinking, one day historians are going to look at this wasteland and wonder which army fought here, and the answer will be two women trying to outflirt each other. The noises they made didn't help. Their growls, hisses, and snarls echoed through the valley, loud enough that distant tribes mistook it for a war cry. Somewhere drums started pounding in response. I yelled, "Tell them it's not war, it's just bad dating," but my voice was nothing compared to their roars. The double entendres only grew worse. "He'll last longer with me." "No, I'll show him what endurance really means." "You'll crush him before he even gets started." Better crushed than left unsatisfied. They weren't even trying to hide the innuendo anymore, and my brain was doing mental gymnastics to keep from collapsing under the images their words conjured. Their rivalry escalated into physical contests. One uprooted a whole grove and arranged the logs into a rough heart shape, smirking as if she'd just invented romance. The other ripped a riverbank apart and diverted the stream into a sparkling pool, insisting it was a bath for me. Of course, she dunked me in it before I could argue, nearly drowning me in the process. I surfaced, gasping, while they both grinned like cats proud of dropping a mouse at their owner's feet. Then came the strength displays. One hurled a boulder so high it disappeared into the clouds. The other punched a cliff until it cracked. Both glanced at me expectantly, waiting for approval like school children showing off projects. I muttered, fantastic, now the planet's definitely going to file a complaint. What really broke me was the noise contest. One decided the way to win my affection was to call out with her loudest roar, shaking every leaf in the jungle. The other immediately tried to top it, her roar splitting the air like thunder. My eardrums rang, and every animal in the region bolted. I groaned, ladies, if this is what flirting sounds like, I'm going deaf before I ever get lucky. Still, there were moments where I glimpsed something almost sweet beneath the chaos. When I fell after being yanked too hard, both rushed to catch me. Their claws were rough, but their touches were careful. When I groaned about pain, they both leaned in, sniffing and fussing like giant nurses. One licked my cheek again, the other nipped my ear. Their rivalry didn't stop, but in those moments, they weren't warriors, they were just women trying, clumsily, to show care. Unfortunately, tenderness never lasted long. The next minute, they were back to bickering. One hissed, he smiled at me first. The other growled, he blushed when I touched him. I tried to clarify that both were stress reactions, but they ignored me. Then came the final straw, they decided to fight directly. They squared off, massive frames circling, tails lashing, claws bared. I shouted for them to stop, but they ignored me. Their first clash sent shockwaves through the ground, knocking me off my feet. They slammed into each other, grappling, snarling, tearing at the earth as they fought for me. Every slam brought down trees, every shove carved trenches in the soil. The jungle wasn't surviving this courtship. In the middle of their brawl, I realized I had one advantage. They cared what I thought. So I stood up, cupped my hands, and shouted, enough! Love isn't about who destroys more trees, it's about who actually listens. They froze, panting, glaring at each other, but their ears twitched at my words. One snarled, then choose. Which of us? The other leaned down, baring her fangs. Yes. Pick the stronger mate. My brain scrambled for survival. If I picked one, the other would probably kill me out of spite. If I picked neither, they'd kill me for wasting their time. So I blurted the only thing that came to mind, both of you. The silence that followed was worse than their roars. They stared at me, eyes narrowed, as if processing the audacity. Then, slowly, their lips curled into identical sly grins. One licked her fangs. The other flicked her tail. In perfect unison, they purred, "Share him." I swallowed hard, realizing I had just stepped into something far more dangerous than a fight. Sharing didn't mean peace, it meant twice the chaos, twice the demands, and twice the chance of being accidentally broken in half. The jungle around us lay in ruins, trees snapped, earth torn apart, animals scattered. And me? I stood in the rubble, caught between two women who had just agreed that instead of fighting for me, they'd keep me together. I muttered, "Great. I've ended a war, and started a honeymoon. Somebody dig me a grave." The decision to share me didn't calm them down, it just redirected the chaos. Suddenly, instead of competing to win me, they were competing to outdo each other in how much affection they could shower me with. Imagine two titans trying to prove tenderness when their idea of gentle could still flatten a mountain. That was my new reality. The first attempt was breakfast. One tore down half a fruit grove and dumped the pile in front of me. Papayas, mangoes, coconuts, all crushed under her claws until it looked like a smoothie spilled across the jungle floor. The other wasn't about to be outdone. She waded into the river and emerged with a wriggling mass of fish, tossing them at my feet like a cat bringing home trophies. Half was still alive, flopping around, slapping me in the face. I groaned, "Thanks, ladies, nothing says romance like being pelted with seafood." They both leaned down and purred, "Eat well, mate. You'll need your strength." My imagination supplied a dozen meanings for that, none of them safe. Then came the gifts. One decided I needed clothing, so she stripped entire patches of jungle vines, weaving them into a tunic that looked more like a tangled fishing net. The other scoffed and presented me with a necklace of bones, still sticky with meat. "Symbol of devotion," she insisted. "Symbol of rabbis," I muttered, wiping my hands on the least bloody rib. Sleeping arrangements were even worse. One scooped me up and cradled me in her arms, insisting I'd be safest there. The other snarled, ripped me away, and built a nest out of uprooted trees. I was shoved into the middle of it like a prize egg. They argued until finally agreeing, both would sleep beside me. That meant two giant bodies pressing in from both sides, claws grazing, tails twitching, every breath hot enough to singe. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and the double entendres practically wrote themselves. When one whispered, "You're so small. I could swallow you whole," I nearly passed out, unsure if she meant it literally. What surprised me most was how their clumsy gestures of romance sometimes worked. In between the destruction and competition, there were moments they looked at me with something softer. When one licked dirt off my arm and muttered, "Too delicate to be filthy," I caught a flash of sincerity beneath the sharp teeth. When the other crouched to shield me from rain with her wings, snarling at the sky for daring to touch me, I almost felt cared for. Then she sneezed, and a tree exploded. The moment didn't last. The jungle around us had stopped trying to survive. Animals had fled miles away, the air hung heavy with smoke and pollen, and entire clearings were reduced to rubble. Somewhere in the distance, a tribe lit torches and chanted, probably assuming the gods were fighting. I was tempted to run and tell them the truth. No gods here, just two lovesick giants who thought breaking the world was foreplay. The worst part? My body was adapting. At first, I was terrified of being squashed, crushed, drowned, or eaten. Now, I caught myself laughing at the absurdity. When one brought me a live jaguar as a gift, I shouted, "Perfect, I've always wanted a pet that could kill me faster than you two." They both hissed at the animal until it fled, then preened as if I'd complimented them. My sarcasm had become a survival tool, and weirdly, it worked. Eventually, I realized they weren't really fighting over me anymore. They were learning from me. My words, my gestures, even my jokes, each of them copied pieces of it. One tried to smile like me, though with her fangs bared it looked more like a murder threat. The other tried hugging me the way I showed, except her version cracked 3 of my ribs. Progress, but dangerous progress. The night of the final storm proved it. Rain hammered the wrecked jungle, lightning split the sky, thunder roared. They both curled around me, tails overlapping, wings folded close, bodies blocking the downpour. For the first time, I felt warm instead of smothered, protected instead of trapped. Their rivalry softened. One whispered, "You are ours." The other added, "Forever." I wanted to argue, to insist I was my own person, not a prize to be claimed. But as the storm raged outside and their enormous hearts thudded in rhythm against me, I realized something horrible. I didn't hate it. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe the madness of surviving weeks of chaos, or maybe something deeper. But for once, I let myself relax between them. Of course, peace never lasted long. At dawn, they both woke, stretched, and immediately argued over who got to carry me to hunt breakfast. Within minutes, they trampled another clearing, scared off the birds, and left me sitting in the mud, muttering, "I should have let the jaguar eat me." The jungle was gone. Flattened, shredded, stripped bare. But the two women? They were radiant, satisfied, and certain that claiming me was the greatest victory of their lives. And me? I stood there, bruised, battered, smelling like fish and fruit pulp, and realized I'd done the impossible. I'd survived being adored to death. I should have run. I should have screamed. Instead, I looked at the wasteland, then at the two titans grinning down at me, and said the dumbest thing imaginable. "So, what's next?" Their smiles widened. One licked her lips. The other purred, "Jungle gone. Next, mountains." I sighed, already picturing myself buried under rubble. Humanity wasn't supposed to survive this kind of love story. But somehow, I had. And maybe that was the most human thing of all, not strength, not courage, but sheer dumb persistence. The jungle didn't survive. But I did. And judging by the gleam in their eyes, the real destruction was only just beginning.